thank you for joining us on our live stream of service at First Unitarian Church of Toledo. This morning we really don't have many announcements. We hope you all are well in your homes, and please don't hesitate to reach out to the church if you need anything for parent concerns or for news.
I do want to say that normally we have our order of service on the screen, so you can follow along and sing the verses to the songs by watching the screen. But today, it being our flower ceremony, this is how we have flowers. So if you want an order of service and you are on our UUFYI email, you can go to the FYI and open an order of service there. For other people, just follow along as best you can and hum when we get to the songs, because they're not very familiar, but they're special because they are written by Norbert Choppett, who we're speaking about. This is a special day, as it's the day of our annual flower ceremony, a Unitarian Universalist ritual begun on June 4th, 1923, by Norbert Choppett, who in Prague founded the Unitarian Church in Czechoslovakia. His flower ceremony, sometimes called the Flower Communion, is based in part on earlier flower ceremonies at American Unitarian and Universalist congregations. But Choppett's idea, which makes this his ceremony, was that each person brings one flower. They're all placed in one vase to demonstrate the unity of humanity. And then each person leaves the ceremony with a different flower, indicating our ties to the collective. Since we can't come together in person this year because we're being cautious about the risk of the coronavirus coming into our congregation, and we're having our Sunday services by video at this time, we asked you to send us pictures you took of flowers, and we're showing 100 of them on a screen throughout the service. This coming Wednesday, June 3rd, will be the 150th anniversary of Norbert Choppett's birth. So I was thinking that this would be a good time to add to today's service by telling about Norbert Choppett during our flower ceremony service. However, I also feel that this is a time when our church must recognize the racism and police terror that is in national and now local news. If you haven't seen today's news, there were protests and marches in Toledo yesterday in reaction to the murder of George Floyd by a police officer in Minneapolis. This death of an unarmed black man by a white law enforcement officer seen on video and giving heightened awareness to the seemingly continual discrimination and racism by Floyd, and sparking demonstrations across the nation, actions that have been accompanied by damage and looting and accusations that there are people purposefully interfering with intended peaceful protests in hopes of bringing down general order, or, according to some reports, trying to start a second civil war. These people adding terror to street activism are said to be from the radical left and the right wing. I fear some for what's ahead this summer. Today, I'll be talking about Norbert Choppett, as was scheduled, and about race and power in our nation, speaking into the moments. There are some changes to the order of service that you might have downloaded from Toledo Unitarians media yesterday or today. So I'll tell a little bit about Norbert Choppett, but most of my words during this flower ceremony service are on the side of social justice and flowers. That is fitting for a Norbert Chopik influence, as his social justice work in building Czechoslovakia resulted in his being arrested by the Nazis in World War II, and he died after being in the Dachau concentration. With that explanation as opening words, let's move to the lighting of the chalice and begin this religious service. Nikki, would you light the chalice while I do? This is Within the Heart of the Flower by Amy Zucker-Morgan. Within the heart of the flower, the fountain of beauty. Within the heart of the community, a fire that warms and dances within the heart of each of us, a spark of the Spirit of life. Holy, holy, holy. Please join me in reciting the covenant of this congregation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We will have 3 songs for congregational singing today, all of them written by Norbert Chopik. First up is number 28, View the Starry Realm. Our director of music, Mickey Miller, will sing, and you might listen if you don't know the words, because Mickey is wonderful at singing. The accompanist is by our pianist, Bonnie Rowe. Chopik was born on June 3rd, 1870, 150 years ago now, in the southern Bohemia region of the Austria-Hungary Empire. Czechoslovakia was formed in 1918 after the end of World War I. At the beginning of 1993, the Czech Republic came into being. 3 days after his birth, Norbert's Roman Catholic mother and Church of the Moravian Brethren father, who yielded to his wife's wishes, took him to the village Catholic church to be blessed. And as it was St. Norbert's Day, they named him Norbert. Norbert was his parents' only child. When Norbert was 9, he received his first communion in the Catholic Church and became an altar boy, helping at the services. But within a year, he was seeing other people serving the church, priests, caretakers, other altar boys, seeming to be more interested in the money coming into the church than its sacred matters. That made him doubt the church of his village. We Unitarians are known to be doubters, so that seed of doubt might be what helped him to become a Unitarian later in his life. When he was 17, he met a Lutheran minister, and they became friends. And that Lutheran introduced him to a Baptist group. 1 month after he turned 18, Norbert became a Baptist by being baptized into that church. A few months later, he was moving to Budapest, in the Hungary part of Austria-Hungary, to be a Baptist missionary, but got as far as Bratislava in Upper Hungary, and was talked into staying there to organize a Baptist congregation. He built a growing church, and he continued exploring religion, learning and bringing in some of the thought of the Bohemian Brethren in Slovakia. When he was 19, the Catholic Church accused Norbert of heresy, and he was arrested. But he showed that he had a license to distribute Bibles, and he went free. When he was 20, he started seminary in Hamburg, Germany. At age 21, he took some time away for what was called a nervous lapse. But he went back to school, stayed into 1893, and then he dropped out because he needed to earn money. Even so, in 1894, when Norbert was 24 years old, he became an ordained Baptist minister on to adulthood. In 1910, when he was about 40, just about to be 40 years old, Reverend Chopik became friends with a philosophy professor in Prague, Tomas Masaryk, who knew about the importance of religion to Czech people. Masaryk would later become the president of Czechoslovakia in 1920. It's said that he made Chopik aware that Chopik wasn't actually a Baptist, but was a Unitarian. And Masaryk knew Unitarians because his wife, Charlotte Garrigue, had been a member of First Unitarian Congregational Society in Brooklyn, New York. However, Chopik was still a Baptist minister. Chopik's ministry, especially what he was writing about the culture and religion of his Czech region, was not what the empire wanted. So when he was told in 1914 that he might be arrested, he took an opportunity to go to the United States and was in our nation during World War I, serving as a Baptist preacher in New York City and Newark, New Jersey. He was also accused of heresy a couple of times by other Baptists and even had a church trial. After World War I, a new Czechoslovak church was forming, and Chopik wanted to be a part of it. It took some time, but he was able to move himself and his family back to Czechoslovakia, and he would make that church Unitarian. It would become the largest Unitarian church in the world. When Germany occupied Czechoslovakia in 1939, the American Unitarian Association offered Chopik and others the opportunity to be ministers in the United States. However, Norbert Chopik wrote to Frederick May Elliott, the president of the American Unitarian Association, that I cannot leave my people no matter what sufferings may be involved. Even as the Nazis were shortening the chain around their victims' necks, wrote Richard Henry, the author of Norbert Fabian Chopik, A Spiritual Journey, The book on which I've drawn most of Chopic's information is published by Skinner House Books, one of our Unitarian Universalist publishers. Norbert Chopic and his colleagues were carrying on as though the occupiers were invisible. Chopic was still minister of the large Unitarian church in Prague and wrote books, but his language, the way he used parables in his sermons and magazine articles, for example, was coming under closer scrutiny by the Gestapo. On March 28, 1941, his house was searched and writings were taken. The next morning, the Gestapo was there to arrest Chopic and his youngest daughter, and they were imprisoned the same day. When there finally was a trial, prosecutors used his sermons to show that he resisted the government and wanted to rebuild Czechoslovakia. Criminal offenses. The SS Court of Appeals would find Chopic.
Your mic cut out. I'm sorry.
I've lost my microphone for a minute. Sorry, we've had a microphone problem. The SS Court of Appeals would find Chopic didn't incite treason through his sermons. His own treason charge was dropped. And while he was found guilty of listening to foreign radio broadcasts, a possible death sentence, he was sentenced to a year, and 11 months already served meant only 1 month for him. However, Reichsprotector Reinhard Heydrich was assassinated on May 27, 1942, and Adolf Hitler retaliated with many arrests and killings. When the Gestapo got the court recommendation, they didn't follow the findings. Norbert Chopic was instead sent to the Dachau concentration. He was there 14 weeks, including on his 72nd birthday. The official report is that Norbert Chopic died at Dachau on October 30th, 1942, and he was cremated there. However, research reveals that he was ill and was probably transferred to a place in Austria and murdered with poison gas on October 12th. There is no grave to put flowers on. And now it's time for our anthem, played by Buddy Rowe. It's Little St. Foil Flower by Cornelius Stern. My call for today is to talk about race, police, killings, drawing your attention as a position of our faith to what needs to change. I start with George Floyd, who died on May 25th, 2020, 6 days ago. "I can't breathe," was what he said when a Minneapolis police officer's knee was on his neck. A knee with pressure on him, apparently before, during, and after George Floyd's death. "I can't breathe" were the same words spoken by Eric Garner when a New York City police officer had him in a chokehold on August 17th, 2014. And Eric Garner died as a result of that incident. George Floyd and Eric Garner were unarmed black men facing much greater violence than their alleged offenses, passing a counterfeit bill and selling cigarettes, should have been subject to talking to, maybe arrest, but not a violent killing. Excuse me one moment. Rich, excuse me. Got an off camera. Black people have been killed by white law enforcement officers for a very long time. From the civil rights movement, I note especially Jimmy Lee Jackson in Marion, Alabama, on February 26, 1965, killed by an Alabama state trooper. And in large part because Jimmy Lee Jackson was black and local, his murder didn't get the national attention that an attack 11 days later in Selma, Alabama, by white racists on 3 Unitarian Universalist ministers responding to Martin Luther King Jr.'s call for clergy to travel to Selma to demonstrate for civil rights. The assault on James Reed, Orloff Miller, and Clark Olson, and Clark was a child of this congregation, as the son of former Toledo Unitarians minister Arthur Olson. That drew notice in part because James Reed died from the racist injuries on March 11, 1965. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered the eulogy at both Jimmy Lee Jackson and James Reed's funeral. The Washington Post reports that although half of the people shot and killed by police, and that includes the shootings of people who were armed, are white, black Americans are shot at a disproportionate rate. They account for less than 13% of the U.S. population, but are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans. Hispanic Americans are also killed by police at a disproportionate rate. All police are not racist, and all police are not white. But the organizations in which they operate do have institutional and systemic racism. And when that is unidentified, it seems that the divide is great. Now the dead include Breonna Taylor, March 13, 2020, with protests still active in Louisville, where police killed her during a no-knock raid in which it's reported they didn't identify themselves. And the suspect in the case they were investigating was already in custody. And Ahmaud Arbery, February 13th, 2020, murdered while jogging in Brunswick, Georgia, with the involvement of a former law enforcement person, and shot by that man's son. Arbery and Taylor and George Floyd were all killed after the world, including the United States, largely withdrew from what had been normal public activity because of the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know if national social isolation means more focus on the wrongs we see, but this is becoming a time to say that so-called normal police activity shouldn't continue in its way any more than we can go back to the world as it was before more than 100,000 people in the U.S., disproportionately black it's have died from the novel coronavirus. Yes, it looks like in police interactions, a person who is black is more likely to be perceived as dangerous and can be killed because of that, because of the color of their skin. On the website Mapping Police Violence, I read that there were 104 killings of unarmed black people by police in 2015, nearly 5 times the number of unarmed white people by police, and 100 unarmed black people killed by police in 2014. Do you see that this is a problem? Law enforcement and white racists, including police who are racist, killing black people when neither the person killed nor the law enforcement officers should have feared for their lives. Too many flowers on prayers, and in street-side shrines improvised where the killing happened. Let's have a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. We're especially thinking about wrongful killings, about protests, about interference in peaceful protests that turn into violent situations, into danger. And yes, I think very much about this with COVID-19 so much a part of the world, and with disagreements stemming from people wearing masks or choosing not to wear masks, that health and safety are becoming. This is going to be a strange summer. Let's live through it as best we can. I have a prayer called A Bouquet of People by Claire Feingold Ford, and it's modeled after a prayer written by the late Reverend Max Stewart. A flower ceremony. Let us give thanks for a bouquet of people. We give thanks for children like tulips and iris. They multiply around us, making the world ever more filled with color, beauty, and new life. May we bless them as they replant themselves ever further from us, knowing that they need their own space to grow into. We give thanks for generous friends as constant in bloom as second nature, and whose gifts lift up our body and spirit. We give thanks for feisty friends as indomitable as geraniums, and for continuous friends who, like bittersweet and ivy, hold on and never let go, and can never be gotten rid of. For crotchety friends as prickly as rose bushes, their beauty a secret that is only discovered through careful guarding. For surprising friends who at first glance seem dour and then blossom into joy as quickly as forsaking. For funny friends, silly as snapdragons, and serious friends, complex as chrysanthemums. For comfortable friends, their gentle presence as soothing as the sweet smell of life. For stormy weather friends, who stand by us in hard times, like lily of the valley that cannot be deterred by shade or shadow. For old friends nodding like sunflowers in the evening time, and young friends coming on fast and far. For friends as unpretentious as dogwood, as persistent as Cassandra, as steadfast as azalea, and who, like snowdrops, can be counted on to see you through the winter and remind you that spring always comes. For loving friends who wind around us like wisteria and embrace us, despite our blights, wilts, and withering. And finally, for forget-me-not friends, gone but never forgotten. Their beauty lives on in our memories and hearts. For this bouquet of people who brighten our lives each in their own, we give. And let us observe a minute of prayer.
Today's reflection song is number 8 in your gray hymnal, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit. Technical problem is that we've lost our slideshow. We have nothing projected. So I guess you have to pay attention. A brief look at Toledo's trial. What offenses is our city being tried for, in a way, by peaceful protests turning destructive? By police using weapons against people who aren't in a position to make the police fear for their lives? How could we try to make compassion bloom in Toledo?
I want to give proper respect to our city's leaders. Mayor Wade Kapsakevich had a meeting Friday with African American leaders and other people connected to the community before the demonstration, with the police chief, George Kroll, in attendance. The Blade, Toledo's daily newspaper, reported, "It was emotional. At times it got heated, but it was important," city officials believe. And the mayor would like to see those meetings continue with even more people present. The mayor added that his administration will make a long-term commitment, the Blade continues, for both dialogue and material to build trust between police and the African American community. Entrenched racism infects all of America, Toledo included, he said, and he encouraged everyone to protest peacefully. "If now is not the time to protest after what happened in Minneapolis, I don't know when you ever would," he said. In a tweet on Thursday morning, the Blade continues, Toledo Police Chief George Kroll called Mr. Floyd's death inexcusable and said all the former officers involved, the one accused of killing him and the ones accused of doing nothing to stop it, must be held accountable. He expanded on that on Friday afternoon, said when he first saw the video, he was sad for Mr. Floyd and for Mr. Floyd's family. "And then I got angry," he calls. "I got very angry." Mr. Floyd's death did not need to happen, he said, and if it had been anyone else kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck long enough to cause his death, they would have been arrested that night. Like the mayor, he acknowledged that what happened in Minneapolis could happen in Toledo. He also reiterated the goal of his to keep increasing diversity in the police department. I add a few words about Toledo in the context of race and power. We have some good foundation in being people together rather than separating, especially with the Multi-Faith Council of Northwest Ohio, our own church's intention of being welcoming to all and forming bonds with people different from our largely white and liberal position. Though we have a very long way to go for our anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism to be natural for us, and to build a congregation that includes a large number of people of color, people who aren't straight, and even younger straight families with their children. I so want us to get. And we have law enforcement represented in our Toledo Unitarians membership. May more see us as a way to guide their decisions. What am I trying to say here in these unusual words for Flower Ceremony Sunday? We have to resist and protest. The police killings of people who don't make police actually fear for their lives. In too many cases, the murder of people of color by officers who work in government to protect and serve, but don't do either of those as we would expect. The actions of law enforcement have reached a breaking point again. I do fear for what is to come, enhanced by our concerns about coronavirus and the world being without full resources of love, kindness, and compassion, much less having any stock in social change for the better. We can follow the inspiration of Norbert Chopper, whose resistance meant he died from Nazi extermination. We won't have to go that far, but we can be laborers helping to build Toledo into a largely anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multicultural, and compassionate. Let's try, please. Let's see if we can do it in a healthy way. Carry flowers, not.
Our song now is number 78, Color and Fragrance. It'll be the first 3 verses.
All of that gets us to the flower ceremony, what some call flower communion. I hope the 100 flowers pictures our members sent, or the pictures we saw from that 100, brought you some sense of community. I'm not sure if there's another way for us to be able to share that very large slideshow somehow. This year's service is different in a couple of ways, but will be traditional for this part. And I also feel that I have to interject at some point, and I'll do it now at the beginning of the ceremony, that this week we did not have a separate offering that was intended, that we were going to show you slides of how to donate during the anthem, but we didn't have those slides. This is a technical. Thank you.
But if folks do want to donate, they can go to UUToledo.org and go to our checkout on the website and look through that donation page. Every dollar counts.
And you could send us a check in the mail. So, flower ceremony. Whenever Norbert Chopin, who originated the flower ceremony, conducted his flower communion in Prague, he would say this proverb as he consecrated the flowers. Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these thy messengers of fellowship and love. May they remind us, amid diversities of knowledge and of gifts, to be one in desire and affection and devotion to thy holy name. May they also remind us of the value of comradeship, of doing and sharing alike. May we cherish friendship as one of thy most precious gifts. May we not let awareness of another's talents discourage us, or solely our relationship. But may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do thy work in this world. I bring a reading from an article by Reginald Zottoli, The Flower Communion, a Service of Celebration for Religious Liberals, to give some history.
The Flower Communion service was created by Norbert Chopik, I always say Chopik, who founded the Unitarian Church of Czechoslovakia. He introduced this special service to that church on June 4th, 1923. For some time, he felt the need for some symbolic ritual that would bind people more closely together. The format had to be one that would not alienate any who had forsaken other religious traditions. The traditional Christian communion service with bread and wine was unacceptable to members of his congregation because of their strong reaction against the Catholic faith. So he turned to the native beauty of their countryside for elements of a communion which would be genuine to them. The simple service was the result. It was such a success that it was held yearly just before the summer recess of the church. Flower communion was brought to the United States in 1940 and introduced to the members of our Cambridge, Massachusetts church by Dr. Chapek's wife, Maya V. Chapek. The Czech-born Maya had met Norbert Chapek in New York City while he was studying for his PhD, and it was at her urging that Norbert left the Baptist ministry and turned to Unitarianism. The Chapeks returned to Czechoslovakia in 1921 and established the dynamic liberal church in Prague. Maya Chapek was ordained in 1926. It was during her tour of the United States that Maya introduced the flower communion, which had been developed in the Prague church at the Unitarian Church in Cambridge. Unfortunately, Maya was unable to return to Prague due to the outbreak of World War II. And it was not until the war was over that Norbert Chapek's death in the Nazi concentration camp was revealed. From this beginning, the service has spread to many of our Unitarian Universalist congregations and has been adapted along the way. People were asked to bring a flower of their choice, either from their own gardens or from the field or roadside. When they arrived at church, a large vase stood waiting in the vestibule, attended by 2 young members of the church steward. Each person was asked to place their flower in the vase. This signified that it was by their own free will they joined with the others. The vase that contained all the flowers was a symbol of the United Church Fellowship. The young attendants helped with the arrangement of the bouquet. Later, they carried the vase up to the front of the auditorium and placed it on the table there. Dr. Chapek then said a prayer, after which he walked over and consecrated the flowers while the congregation stood. The 2 attendants then took the vase back out into the vestibule. After the service, as people left the church, they went to the vase and each took a flower from the vase other than the one they had brought. The significance of the flower communion is that as no 2 flowers are alike, so no 2 people are alike, yet each has a contribution to make. Together, the different flowers form a beautiful bouquet. Our common bouquet would not be the same without the unique addition of each individual flower, and thus, it is with our church community. It would not be the same without each and every one of us. Thus, this service is a statement of our community. By exchanging flowers, we show our willingness to walk together in our search for truth, disregarding all that might divide us. Each person takes home a flower brought by someone else, thus symbolizing our shared celebration in the community. This communion of sharing is essential to a free people, free religion.
Norbert Chapek would also say a prayer during the flower. Here it is, slightly. In the name of Providence, which implants in the seed the future of the flower, and in our hearts the longing for people to live in harmony. In the name of the highest, in whom we move, and who makes the mother and father, the brother and the sister, lover and loner what they are. In the name of sages and great religious leaders who sacrificed their lives to hasten the coming of the age of mutual respect, let us renew our resolution sincerely to be real brothers and sisters, regardless of any kind of bar which estranges us from each other. In this holy resolve, may we be strengthened, knowing that we are God's family, that one Spirit, the Spirit of love, and endeavor for a more perfect and more joyful life. These are closing words of Norbert Chapek. there is some application to the current state of race police still, and people's resistance to the direction things have continued on with no substantive change. It is worthwhile to live and fight courageously for sacred ideals. Oh, blow ye evil winds into my body's fire, my soul will never unravel. Even though disappointed 1,000 times, or fallen in the fight and everything would worthless seem, I have lived amidst eternity. Be grateful, my soul, my life was worth living. He who was pressed from all sides but remained victorious in spirit is welcomed into the choir of heroes. He who overcame the fetters, giving wing to the mind, is entering into the golden age of the victorious. Amen, and so be it. And now, let's look ahead to what's coming soon. Next week's Spiritual Adventures Forum at 10 a.m. is an update on our strategic plan, led by Colette Cordova. And next week's 11 a.m. service is titled Pay Attention, and it will be led by Melissa Jeter, one of our commission members.
I'd like to invite you all to a coffee hour. Though our password and invitation code are not on the screen, we will make sure you can look for that in your order of service. And if you're connected with us on Facebook or in YouTube, we'll make sure you have. Our recessional today, our closing.
And that Zoom number is the same one as last week. Closing words and sending the flame. This is for the flowers have the gift of language by Richard S. Hill. Speak, flowers, speak. Why do you say nothing? The flowers have the gift of language. In the meadow, they speak of freedom, creating patterns wild and free as no gardener could match. In the forest, they nestle, snug carpets under the roof of leaf and branch, making a rug of such softness. At end tip of branches, they cling briefly before bursting into fruit. Flowers, can you not speak joy to our sadness and hope to our fear? Can you not say how it is with you that you color the darkest corner? The flowers have the gift of language. At the occasion of birth, they are buds before bursting. At the ceremony of love, they unite two lovers in beauty. At the occasion of death, they remind us how lovely is life. Oh, would that you had voice, silent messengers of hope. Would that you could tell us how you feel arrayed in such beauty. The flowers have the gift of language. In the dark depths of a death camp, they speak the light of life. In the face of cruelty, they speak of courage. In the experience of ugliness, they bespeak the persistence of beauty. Speak, messengers, speak, for we would hear your message. Speak, messengers, speak, for we need to hear what you would say. For the flowers have the gift of life. They transport the human voice on winds of beauty. They lift the melody of song to our ears. They paint through the eye and hand of the artist. Their fragrance binds us to sweet-smelling earth. May the blessing of the flowers be upon you. May their beauty beckon you each morning, and their loveliness lure you each day, and their tenderness caress you each night. May their delicate petals make you gentle, and their eyes make you aware. May their stems make you sturdy, and their reaching make you.
Anila will play for us In a Woodland Glade by Alexander Gretchanino. We hope to see you in our happy hour soon.